Okay, the next pane that we'll be interested in is the processes tab. Like I said, processes can be divided into stationary and transportation processes. We're going to start with stationary processes. So if I add a stationary process right now, it pulls up a brand new blank screen over here. So what we can do now, processes being links of resources and things like that. Of course, first thing is you can change the name. And after you change the name, you can go straight to resources. And over here are all the resources that are available. Here, obviously listed are only the first few are just frequently used. But you can search for any resource. So example, if I search for corn stover, this is a resource that exists thanks to the resources tab, which we should have created. If you don't have it, you need to create it before it's available in processes. And you can merely drag it as an input and drop it in here. And right when you do that, Greet will give you a message saying that it needs an output to be defined before it can make any calculations. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And let's say we're going to make ethanol from this. Again, ethanol is a frequently used resource, so I'm going to drag it all the way into the main output tab. Next thing what you can do is you can put in values. So I'm going to first of all change the units of everything from energy to mass so that I can make inputs. And I'm going to start, for example, if I start with 100 kilograms of corn stover, and end up with 1 kilogram of biomass, of ethanol, excuse me, that data can be put in. Now, after you do this, you can put in values for other types of resources. So as inputs, we could put sulfuric acid in there, and again give it whatever value we want. If we're going to use 0.5 kilograms, obviously that's just a guess number. But another thing that you're going to need to watch out for over here is the source of each of these input values needs to come from somewhere. Now, depending on the pathway that you create, because processes are eventually going to be linked to final pathways, if your process in here does get a resource, an input that comes from another process that's going to be in your pathway, what you can do is you can just say output of a previous process. So that means this input over here is an output from another process that's eventually going to be in your pathway. If not, you have to say either single pathway or pathway mix for very specific cases, but we'll just say a single pathway. Obviously, if it's a primary resource, something that's just grown and picked up directly out of nature, you can call it a primary resource. If not, we'll pick single pathway. And yeah, even though corn stover is from nature, Greet.net actually takes into account things like harvesting and transportation of raw corn stover into its environmental implications calculations. So we can say corn stover for ethanol plant. And that's a pathway that's already been created, and you can view that pathway later on just to make sure. So what we can also do is we can include technologies in here. So during each process, you'll have inputs, you'll have outputs, but also you'll have technologies. So when you click on the Technologies tab, based on the inputs that you've put in, it'll give you a list of technologies that are compatible. Again, like I said, links in Greet.net are very important, so compatibility is something that it always looks for. So if it picks up a small industrial boiler, you can drag and drop it into corn stover. And then now, small industrial boiler technology has been input into the corn stover input. And that's taking into account 100% of all the corn stover. If I wanted to pull another one in there, you can then make modifications on the total percentage so that they all eventually add up to 100%. And these again are going to be modifications that will be eventually put into your final calculation. Below over here is a drag and drop menu for other outputs. So for example, in a biomass processing plant, some of the residual material, typically containing lignin, will be burned for electricity. So you can drag and drop electricity in here and mention something like 1,000 megajoules or 1,000 joules being the value that you can put in based on your calculations. So that's how a new stationary process can be made. Of course, stationary processes do exist in Greet.net, and you can view them later from the pathway tab, and we'll go over that later, or you can view them right from here. So if we click on modify a process, there are tons of processes existing in Greek.net, and they tell you exactly whether it's a stationary or transportation process. So if I were to pick, again, some sort of ethanol process, average ethanol produced in the United States. Over here, you'll have a tab of presets. So each of these ethanol, it's not quite shown over here because it comes from a pathway, but each of these ethanol sources are sources of ethanol that come from different forms of production. So for example, corn ethanol, cellulosic ethanol by dilute acid pretreatment, cellulosic ethanol produced by Apex pretreatment, etc., etc., etc. Now each of these eventually is going to link together, but obviously from here it shows that I believe this tab is going to be for corn ethanol, but you can pick numerous pathways to do the same. Now if we go ahead and pick, say, a transportation process, I'm just picking a general one over here. Transportation processes are slightly different because they don't quite use the same input-output logic. Instead, if we start with a transportation process from scratch, to create a transportation process, you have very, very clear instructions at the top. So first it asks you to input the resource that's transported, and we could do that right here. So if we say the resource being transported in our case is corn stover, it gives you a little check mark to say that you have completed that. The next step is you're going to drag and drop locations. Now locations in Greek.net is slightly a funny term. It doesn't actually matter what the location is. What matters is the distances that you put in that allow for transportation calculations to be made. And without those distances, Greek.net will not be able to make accurate calculations. So if we start with our plants, and we start from a biodiesel plant, for example, and we're going from a biodiesel plant to the continental United States, and we're doing it by three major modes. We're going to do it by barge, we're going to do it by pipeline, okay, we can just ignore that, and if we do it by rail, sorry about that, do it by rail, and then when you go ahead you can connect them together. Wait for that little blue check mark to put it together. So some modes are more compatible with the others, and that's why you'll get little error messages at Greek.net that tell you whether you can or can't do them. And once you go into them, you can double click or right click and input the distances you want. So it could be 500 meter barge or how much ever, depending on your on the case that you want. And then in doing so, you can save this, and this would be a brand new transportation mode. Again, like I said, transportation processes do exist in Greek.net. They're very numerous. So you can always pick any one of them if you would like to look at an example of them. Some of them obviously are a lot more complex than the other, but Greek.net has a vast database of them that you can always use.